I'm tempted to say show them this film, but that might be a bit self-serving. I think the argument...
Be a good first step as long as they can get somebody to sit down and watch. But beyond showing your film, are there any suggestions? Because whatever you suggest probably is also going to be useful for people like me in the Jewish community who are trying to reach the so-called leadership with the truth.
Yep. I would say the argument to be made there to the Jesse Jacksons, etc., is that, hey, the right to keep and bear arms is our right. I mean, the 14th Amendment was all built around laws that disarm specifically black Americans and Union veterans. It was designed to keep them in their place and keep them vulnerable to a violent attack. The civil rights movement was based largely upon people who were armed and therefore couldn't be snuffed out by the Klan at their leisure, as happened to some of them who made the mistake of not going armed. And even today, who most needs the right to defend against criminal attack? And the answer is, urban area African Americans disproportionately. That's the group that is looking at the worst threat of criminal attack. And here's this, like I say, 2.5 million defensive uses per year.
Where does that number come from again?
I filmed Professor Gary Kleck, professor of criminology, Florida State University, and he's done the biggest surveys on defensive gun use that have ever been undertaken. I think he surveyed 5,000 people, whereas for most polls on who's going to win the presidency, you stop at about 1,200. Well, he got 5,000. And extrapolating from their answers, he said the conclusion was that Americans use guns defensively about 2.5 million times a year. He also said that about 400,000 of those people projected would say, if you asked them, that they felt their defensive gun use preserved a life, either their own or someone else's. He goes on to point out, all you can know in a survey is what a person tells you, but suppose that of those 400,000 who would say it, 90% were wrong. That's still 40,000 lives saved, which is more than were taken by criminal use. So the odds are that in terms of protecting against crime versus committing crime, guns at least break even and probably come out on top in terms of saving more lives than are taken.
Well, they certainly would have been useful during World War II in Europe.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Some people don't quite understand that yet, but had people had firearms and were willing to use them, I think there'd be more dead Nazis than were alive Nazis. There's a lot of information here, and I hope that people will buy the video, because there's more than we can really cover in 30 minutes. But let's spend some time talking about what people can do with this and what you'd recommend and what kind of, a game plan people can put together to utilize all the knowledge that you've put together.
Well, I think Professor Glenn Reynolds, who's in the film actually, has published a book called Army of Davids, the idea that modern technology enables us to organize spontaneously without an organizational pattern behind us, without the mass media supporting us. You can get thousands of people to do something without having a formal structure. And I think with this DVD, every gun owner can essentially become a one-person PR firm for the Second Amendment. They can show it to people. In fact, I put up on the website a license that after April 1st of the coming year, they can show it on cable TV for free. So go to your community, start showing it. Show it to your friends. Show it to your kids so they know the history of the right to arms and why it's important. See if their school will let you show it. I mean, essentially, every one of us can become a PR firm.
What would you suggest, though, and a little more specifically, that people can do, let's say, in their own family, their own community, with their co-workers? What kind of activities, aside from simply showing it, can they undertake to encourage others to become very enthusiastic about the right to keep and bear arms?
I think just talking to them, explaining the importance. If you're in an area where you can get CCW permits, suggest to those who might need the most protection, in particular ladies in the office, that you might want to look into this.
You mentioned CCW permits, concealed carry permits. From a JPFO perspective, concealed carry permits are immoral. I mean by that, we all have a God-given right to defend our life, So why do we have to pay the state for a revocable privilege that then tells us where we can carry a firearm to defend our life? Do you have any comments about what kind of mindset I think CCW owners should start developing so that we can eliminate these laws and fully enjoy a God-given right?
Well, I think the mindset you'd start out with is obviously they've had an extremely good record in terms of CCW holders not getting in trouble except over technical points. So your next step would be to try to extrapolate that to gun ownership in general, responsible gun owners in general. That would there be a problem with them carrying? Well, it's sort of hard to articulate it. I mean, how many, obviously you have to ask yourself, how many people who are bent upon committing a serious crime are going to be worried about a misdemeanor citation for carrying concealed? So presumably, I suspect the answer is pretty close to zero. So what's the good of it? I think you might want to develop the sort of mindset that even though I got this permit, I really would have liked to get it, to have my rights without having to get the permit, and therefore maybe that's the next step.
Well, I think that is. I think that we, the governed, give our consent to the government, and I think it's time to withdraw our consent.
Well, we've seen some movement here in Arizona toward moving slowly in that direction. Of course, Arizona was always open carry, no CCW at all, but you'd carry openly anywhere you wanted. Then we went with an optional CCW system, and now they're starting to pare back the requirements. So we may eventually get there. I think the first one was they cut out the requirement for taking 4 hours retraining every 3 years. And then I think they cut down on the number of hours. And so you may eventually get there just step by step.
Well, with due pressure from people who have something to offer the country and be able to tell the government that they're wrong, yeah, I think maybe in due time. But sooner better than later. It took you many years to put this film together. And I think for those of us who make films, I guess a question from my perspective is, what was the most difficult thing you had to deal with? Well,
it took almost exactly 4 years. I started filming in January 2003, and I trust you'll understand where I'm coming from when I say the biggest problem was getting up enough money to do it. With any documentary of this type, and I'm sure with yours, you get something done, and then you have to go back. There's no budget to do the rest of it, so you have to go back and try and scare up some money to do that. Do one more thing, and then go back and look for it. I'll tell you the truth, Aaron. I suspect that both of us, as working on documentaries, come to appreciate what it was like to be the captain of a mercenary army in the medieval period. I mean, basically, the troops need to be fed, and so for every day you spend fighting, you'll spend 6 months trying to, keep things together.
That's pretty much it. That's a good way to put it. When you were traveling around the country and doing the documentary film, did you have any problems with people who didn't want to talk or who were reluctant to be interviewed?
Only one who I won't mention. It was just seemed like I could never set up the actual filming, and I don't know what was going on there. He may just have been camera shy.